Remember way back at E3 2015 when everyone was freaking the hell out about cryo weapons? Because I do, and back then, I was really excited. Now, I'm not going to say that I think cryo weapons are bad necessarily, but I will say that I think the Cryolator is slightly disappointing when compared to the original hype surrounding it. And the reason I say this is, at E3, we saw a glow-sighted Cryolator pistol in the player's inventory at the gameplay demo, which made us all assume that you could totally trick out and modify the Cryolator in the same way you could do to plasma and laser guns. But unfortunately, this is far from the case. You've really only got 3 non-standard mods for the Cryolator, which is really disappointing considering how much we initially expected. However, I was recently looking into the matter, and I actually think there's a very good chance we're going to get an expansion on cryo weapons in a future DLC. And just to clarify here, when I say expansion, I mean that I think we're going to get the ability to craft a ton more mods for the Cryolator and make things like a cryo sniper, a cryo shotgun, a cryo pistol, and stuff of that nature. To explain the reasoning behind my theory, I first want to backtrack all the way to Fallout 3 because there's something interesting you guys should know about cryo weapons in Fallout 3. For those of you who aren't aware, the Cryolator was initially intended to be in Fallout 3, but was actually cut from the final version of the game, as evidenced by the screenshots that you're seeing right now. From its description, we can pretty much deduce that the Cryolator from Fallout 3 is the same as the weapon that's currently in Fallout 4 with a couple of tweaks. Why is this relevant? Well, it means that Bethesda has been working on the Cryolator for 7 years now. So you would think that given all that time, Bethesda would be able to give us something a little more than just the same Cryolator they had intended to put in Fallout 3. More specifically, you'd expect that they would give us more options to mod the Cryolator given all the time they had to work on it. So cryo weapons are a huge disappointment, right? Well, fortunately for us, things aren't quite that simple. Believe it or not, Bethesda also initially intended for us to be able to mod the Cryolator to the same degree as other energy weapons. The reason I say this is that Bethesda cut out a weapon called the Cryolator pistol from Fallout 4. There is also some evidence of scope attachments that were initially intended to be in the game, which means Bethesda probably cut out a lot of attachments for the Cryolator from Fallout 4. Why do I bring this up? The fact that extra attachments for cryo weapons and different variants of it like the cryo pistol were cut out from the game before release means there's already some existing code for these attachments. And for those of you who know DLC, a lot of times content that is cut from the main release of the game is included in a future add-on. A perfect example of this is the cryo grenade from Fallout 3, which was cut from the initial release but included in Mothership Zeta. What I'm trying to get at here is that I think it's pretty likely Bethesda will expand on cryo weapons in a future DLC in such a way that will allow us to mod them to a greater extent. In other words, I think that in a future DLC we're going to be able to make cryo snipers, cryo shotguns, and other stuff of that nature. Because for one, it would be really easy for Bethesda to do this since there's already some code to support it. For two, it would be really cool for fans of the game. And for three, Bethesda has already done stuff like this in the past, which sets a precedent. If Bethesda is looking for a quick and easy way to please fans, then this would be the best way of doing it. And for that reason, I think it's very possible we will get a Cryo Weapon Expansion of sorts in a future DLC. Now, just a warning here guys, most of what I've said so far is backed up by a decent amount of evidence, but what you're about to hear is pure speculation, and if anything is more of a DLC concept and idea than something I think is actually necessarily going to happen. But even still, if Bethesda did do something like this, I think it would be really cool. For starters, the person who made the Cryolator in Vault 111 was the Overseer at around the year 2077. The first thing to realize is that obviously the Overseer was working for Vault-Tec, and we all know that there's something rather fishy about Vault-Tec since, to name one thing, they were experimenting on the residents of Vault 111 by testing the effects of cryo technology on them. What if the Overseer making the Cryolator and the fact that Vault-Tec was testing the effects of cryo technology on humans was somehow connected? That is, what if Vault-Tec is manufacturing cryo weapons? I realize it's a bit of a stretch, but the fact that it's been 200 years since the Cryolator was first made, combined with the fact the person who made it worked for Vault-Tec, and Vault-Tec was conducting cryo experiments on people, makes it very possible that they were doing cryo weapons research. Perhaps Vault-Tec has even taken cryo weapons to a whole nother level, and in the 200 years since the first Cryolator, has progressed cryo weapons so far that it forms an entirely new class of weapons. In the same manner that we have energy weapons as its own class in Fallout 4. And if Vault-Tec hasn't done it, then at least somebody out there has got to have made cryo weapons other than the Overseer. How cool would it be if Bethesda went beyond just giving us more attachments for cryo weapons and gave us a massive cryo weapon expansion that includes all new types of cryo weapons and stuff like cryo launchers and cryo infused swords? I'm sure they have tons of ideas for new cryo weapons given that they've been experimenting with cryo weapons since Fallout 3. And if Bethesda did end up doing this, what better way to introduce a cryo weapon expansion than by giving us an ice DLC? That is, a DLC that takes place somewhere snowy or icy, which is definitely not out of the question since Boston is in the northeastern US after all. I really feel as though a snowy or icy area like this would give Bethesda some really cool environments to work with and would give us a great change of pace to complement the current wasteland that's in Fallout 4. We also know that Bethesda has put a ton of effort into the weather in Fallout 4 with stuff like radiation storms in the game, and an ice DLC would give them another opportunity to play around with weather in their game. As such, I think the prospect of a DLC that takes place in an icy or snowy area is really awesome. Even still, like I said earlier, the chances of this actually happening are somewhat slim. I do think there's some merit to Bethesda potentially expanding the set of mods for the Cryolator in an upcoming DLC, but for the most part the rest of this video, I admit, was just pure speculation. Well, alright folks, that is pretty much gonna do it for this video. As always, if you enjoyed, be sure to drop me a like down below and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already for more Fallout content in the future. Also, be sure to let me know down below, do you think we're going to get a Cryo Weapon expansion at some point, and would you like to see something like this? Otherwise, I hope you all have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you in my next video.